Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Lauren, and today I am going to be sharing with you guys my favorite books I've read since starting my channel. So first off, I just want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, and that is the video quality of this video. I did not get a new camera, I just learned how to use the camera on my phone properly, so better late than never, I guess. But on to the matter at hand, my favorite books I've read since starting my channel. So I've had my channel a little over 3 years, and I have read, I don't even know how many books I've read at this point, a couple hundred at least. And this was actually a very hard list to compile. On my first pass, I had over 20 books that were like what I would call books that I love that were my favorites. And obviously that is too many books to talk about in one video, so I had to trim it down. Even at that, though, I came up with a list of 12 books that I would call my favorite. Now, in an effort to keep this video from being an hour long, I am only going to go into detail about the top 6 books. The first 6, I'm just going to list them off for you. Then the bottom, or the top, God, however you want to look at it. Then the top 6, I am going to tell you a little bit more about. Even at that, though, I know that this could be a super long video, so I'm going to limit myself to 5 things about each of these books that I love, as well as those top 5 favorite things about each book. I'm going to list some of the primary tropes and themes, and give you kind of a general idea, very briefly, of what each one is about. A couple of disclaimers before I start. This was an extremely difficult list to compile. I can almost guarantee that if I were to make this list in a month or 2 even from now, it would probably look pretty different. So first of all, this list is subject to change. Second of all, these are my favorite books based on nothing but the fact that I loved them the most. These are not necessarily the most well-written books or books that I think should be everyone else's favorites or anything like that. These are just the ones that I love the most. And finally, if your favorite books are not on this list, either I haven't read them or they just aren't my favorites. We are different people. We all have different tastes. And that, I think, is the fun thing about this. We're able to have conversations about our feelings on books and form relationships over those thoughts and feelings. All right, so without further ado, let's just jump right in. So like I said, first I am going to list books 12 through 7. So number 12 for me is The Rules of Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. Number 11 is Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. Number 10 would be A House at the Bottom of a Lake by Josh Malerman. 9 is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. 8 is A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. And number 7 is I Am Behind You by John Ajvide Lindqvist. All right, so we have made it to my top 6 favorite books I've read since starting my channel. And number 6, we have To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is a sci-fi novel, and it is about a space crew traveling through space, searching for a planet that is habitable for human life that they can terraform. The primary themes of this book, I would say, include space exploration, the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of scientific understanding, and honestly kind of a found family sort of theme. My top 5 favorite things about this book included very well developed characters, a beautiful writing style. It was a quiet writing style, but incredibly profound. I loved how this story expressed a certain hopefulness for the future. I think that that can be really lacking in a lot of sci-fi novels. Throughout the course of this story, the crew visits a number of different worlds. I really liked how believable those worlds were. It gave me the sense that this book was very well researched. And finally, the ending of this book I thought was excellent. It was absolute perfection. Number 5 on the list, we have Nightfall by Daniel Barnett. This is the first installation of the Nightmareland Chronicles. This is a horror series, and it is set in a world in which the sun has just suddenly vanished and the people are descending into madness and chaos begins to ensue. The main themes for me, I would say, included those of fear, desperation, insanity, and honestly, friendship and family both played a pretty big role in this story. 5 things I loved about this book included the fact that for me, it was super immersive. From the very beginning, this book sucked me right in. It was also deeply unsettling in the best way possible. This was a very, very spooky, creepy book. This book was, especially for how thin it is, I mean, this book isn't even 150 pages long. It was an incredibly robust story. The world was very well fleshed out. Daniel Barnett did a lot with very few pages. The characters, I felt like, were very realistically gray. They were very real to me and very easy to root for. And finally, I love the fact that the author did not try to over-explain. Honestly, it doesn't wrap up neatly, so if you prefer a book that wraps up neatly, this is not it. All right, moving right along, we've got number 4, which is Blackwater by Michael McDowell. This is a Southern Gothic horror novel, really kind of a creature horror. This is a family saga set in the Deep South, in a small town in the Deep South where the people try to build a levee in a very vain attempt to keep out this powerful, some sort of powerful force. This is like an 800 and some odd page book, so that is a really big simplification, but that's the basic idea of the story. I would say that for me, the primary themes of this book included family, loyalty, love, betrayal, and wealth. 5 things that I loved about Blackwater, first of all, included the fact that it was a multi-generational story. I can very easily get sucked into a good family saga. Secondly, this was a horror story, but not a scary one. It was creature horror, which I'm beginning to discover is like one of my favorite subgenres of horror. I also really love the complexity of all of the relationships in this book. They were very well conceived. This book had an excellent beginning. Probably one of the best beginnings I've ever read in a book. It did a lot of foreshadowing for what was to come. And finally, my very favorite thing about this book was that it was what I would call a full circle story. In other words, the ending really circled back around to where the whole thing began. All right, we are to my top 3 favorite books that I've read since starting my channel. And number 3 is going to be The Electric State by Simon Stålenhag, which if you have watched my channel for any amount of time, you know that I sing the praises of this book anytime I get a chance. This is a dystopian sci-fi novel. It is actually a road trip story where the protagonist and their robot companion are traveling across what is really just kind of a wasteland that the United States has become, and sort of getting a first-hand view of the remains of VR technology takeover, I guess. The main theme of this book, I would say, it is about how technology, VR in particular, could possibly become the downfall of humanity. The main things that I loved about this book, first of all, is the artwork. This book was written and illustrated by Simon Stålenhag, who is an incredible artist. I would be hard-pressed to pick a favorite, but this is probably one of my favorites in this book, this full spread, just to give you a taste of what this is like. This is another favorite of mine. I don't know if you can see that very well. It's a little dark, but I really, really love that one. Though there is a narrative being told, I loved how the artwork did a lot of the talking for this. Some of these images are just haunting. This book had what I would call the gold standard of open endings. If you don't like open endings, this may not be the one for you, but if you like open endings or even just can handle an open ending, this one is just stunning. I love that this book was kind of a cautionary tale. I can get behind a good cautionary tale, especially when it is as pertinent and timely to the age that we're living in. And finally, I just found this book very personally relatable. In this story, the characters are on some sort of unknown journey. We don't find out what that is until the very end. I'm obviously not going to spoil it, but what that is, like, it hit me straight through the heart. This book meant a lot to me on a very personal level. All right, number 2 on the list, we have House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. This book is a lot of things. I would say that it would be most accurately described as a mix between horror, mystery, thriller, and honestly some like kind of urban fantasy elements to it, or sort of magical elements, I guess. This book is a story within a story within a story, but I would say that the primary story arc of this book is about a family that moves into a house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. The themes in this book, it is incredibly thematically rich. I feel like the ones that really stood out the most to me included themes of family, secrecy, obsession, fear, grief, trauma. I loved so many things about this book, but some of my very favorite things about this book, first of all, included the structure of it. This is a very unusually told story. Some pages have a lot on them. Some pages have just a few words on them. There are pages in here that, like, there's a list there. There are pages in this book where the text is written backwards, text is written sideways. There are all kinds of puzzles and riddles that seem to exist in the structure of the book. It really makes you work for it, but that's the second thing I love about this book. I love that it makes you work for it. This isn't for everyone because of that, but if you can stick it out, the amount of work that you put into this provides a huge payoff. Thirdly, this book was maximum creep factor for me. It is very, very unsettling, disturbing, spooky. This is one of very few books that, like, legitimately gave me, like, tingles in my spine. It gave me goosebumps. I love that this book is so thematically rich. It has so much that you could take from it, so many different ways to see it. This book, you can be read many, many times. I would say that's probably my favorite thing about it. You could read this over and over and you're always going to get something different out of it. It kind of meets you where you're at, so to speak. All right, and last but not least, my favorite book that I have read since starting my channel, and probably this might be my all-time favorite book. It is Born by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a post-apocalyptic dystopian sci-fi novel. It has a very complex storyline, but I would say that overall, this is the story of a woman who is kind of a scavenger for a living in this post-apocalyptic wasteland. One day she finds a creature in her scavenging journey, a little creature. She doesn't know what it is. She names it Born, and through sort of raising Born and developing a relationship with him, he sort of becomes the key to unlocking her understanding of this world that she lives in. Like I said, this is a very complex story, but I absolutely adore this book. This one really, really worked for me. Primary themes in Born, I would say, include friendship, loyalty, secrecy, memory, the nature of memories, and technology, and kind of how it could possibly be the downfall of humanity. Biotechnology in particular. My absolute favorite things about this book, first of all, include that it is weird. This is a very weird book. I love that about this book. I love weird books. It is one of a kind, and I doubt I will ever read another book quite like it. I loved the relationship between the protagonist, Rachel, and Born. It was just one of the most beautiful literary relationships I have ever read. I loved the high tension scenes in this book. They were so enveloping, so engaging. I was really, really there with the characters. Honestly, the writing in general, I think that Jeff Vandermeer is an incredibly good writer, and this, to me, of everything I've read of his, this is really the pinnacle of his writing. Very beautifully written and accessible novel. And finally, I loved the setting of this book. It's a very rough post-apocalyptic wasteland, which I have read a few of these, and those that I've read have been well written, but this is one of the most well-conceived that I think I have ever read. It was just perfect. All right, so that is it. Those are my top 12 favorite books I have read since starting my channel. I would be very curious to know what you thought about this list. If you have read any of these books, what you thought about them, or maybe you haven't read them and something really stood out to you. I would love to know if there's any of these that you think you might pick up. I'd also be curious to know what some of your favorites are, so be sure to share those thoughts with me in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will like it and possibly subscribe, and I will see you next time.